Hello, and in this part we're gonna start building the procedural sci-fi door. So to start with, I'm gonna use a box and I'm gonna scale this box so it's the shape of a door. So here in the size, I'm gonna start with 0.03. Then for the height, I'm gonna take 1.25. And for the width, I'm gonna take 0.5. Then I also want to center the door a bit better, as right now it's sort of like in the middle. So what I'm gonna do here is select this value and we're gonna drag it down here, and I'm gonna click on relative reference. So it's referenced now. This value has to be divided by 2, and then we divide by 2, we can see that it's now perfectly on the grid. So by changing this to bigger size, it always stick on the grid. I'm also going to do that for the width and divide it by 2, and we can see now it's perfectly here in the middle. So we have our base door, and we can later then just mirror the other version. Then I'm going to place a null node, and this null node I'm going to call out base door. So later on I'm going to reference the null node to get this basic shape, so it has a clear name that I know of. Then I'm going to start Boolean interesting shapes in this base, and for this one I'm going to use the Boolean shatter one. So if I now create a box, plug it in here. If you don't have the wireframe, nothing would really happen, but if you enable the wireframe, we can see that the Boolean shatter made a cut here. So based on where this box will be, you can see that it's gonna cut out the shape, but it's gonna give both pieces. What I'm also gonna do here is baffle this part, so it's a bit more interesting. And then we can use this to make some interesting shapes in the door. Then I'm gonna do more booleans in this one. And I'm gonna start by just copying this, and I'm gonna place it on this side, for example. Then we can simply merge these results by selecting them and holding the Alt button to merge it. And in here, I might do also a boolean here. So you could build up booleans here to get more variation. And in this one, I'm gonna copy this part again, and I'm gonna subtract from each other. And this one, I'm gonna make it smaller, of course. And let's see how this looks like. So it looks like this, and this can be a bit more interesting of a shape to have if you want that. So if I would replace this now, you can see that we have sort of like these shapes going on. If you want that. Then some interesting setting here in the boolean is the A only pieces, so we can enable this. And then I use a split node, and in the split node we have this A pieces that we just created, and we can see that we can now sort of always filter afterwards which pieces I want to use for some procedural modeling. I'm going to keep that on the side for a moment, and we could, for example, always later on switch between different pieces of what we want. So next step, I want to create some spacing between these panels because they're now all next to each other. And I'm going to use the quick group node. And in this node, I'm going to select the x-axis. So all the faces that are looking on the x-axis are selected. And I can actually split geometry. The first input is then only this result. And I'm going to transform this part a bit backwards, so it's like sort of in the center. And in here, I'm going to use the poly expand 2D. So this is a cool node to use, but keep in mind that this only works well on 2D shapes, as it's also called the expand 2D. So it doesn't really work on fully three-dimensional spaces. So I'm gonna have to disable the outside, and Let's add an extra 0 here, and we can already see the results going on. So as you can see, it also automatically sorts out these parts nicely when it gets too thin. You can see that it's cleanly removed without having to like manually figure it out. So you can fine-tune the spacing between panels that you would like to have. So again, for demonstration, if I would, for example, use a sphere and plug this in, you can see that it throws a warning because it's only going to work on these flat shapes or only two-dimensional shapes. And then with this result, I'm going to extrude it. So sort of like restore the original thickness. Then we're going to start adding some detail. And I'm going to again use the quick group node. And in this node, I'm going to select the x-axis again to only have this part. And I will be start using the SciFi surface detailer. So with this node, it automatically will select this group, which is the same as the quick group. And we can see that this is scaled too much. And it automatically places these SciFi details for you, which is pretty nice to have. So you don't have to deal with that anymore. And we have different styles, as you could see here. There are some variation of these versions. So for the first version, I'm gonna just keep style 1, and I will be using a sphere. And right now, this is of course way too much, and I want to have like subtle points somewhere here. This should be fine. We can also start getting more selective with our placement, like this is skipping one. We can also go in intersections, and I'm going to enable the fast intersection checker. So if pieces are, for example, like you can see here, it's already working. Like if pieces are super close to each other, like here, and we enable the intersection checker, you can see that it sort of like merges them together. So that can be interesting to enable. So I'm going to set it to a lower value, and I'm going to change this back to something that I like. So if we ever generate something that has like close points to each other, it's going to merge the results. And then I want to use another surface node again to detail it. And we can basically stack them under each other. And in here at the bottom, we can basically enable stacking nodes. It's going to look from this input to this one. And this will give away better results. If I would, for example, disable the stacking, we can see that it's also going to create these shapes, which can look cool, but it's not really what I'm looking for. So, but basically with style 2, it's gonna look at all the edges, and it's gonna see if you can detail the edge. But in this case, the detail is also here, and with enable stacking, it's gonna look at the reference we have here, and it's gonna boolean based on that. And then in here I might make some changes. Like we can roll the shape. Maybe we can lower the scale. We can also make this. You're gonna have to find the look that you want to. For example, I want something that look like this. And with these surface detail nodes, it's quite easy to start detailing the models. You could also, for example, take other styles like style 3 or 4. Like you have some variation in here, and you can also use custom inputs. So you can use this middle input here and use something else that you want as input. But for now, I'm going to keep it on this. Then next, I want to maybe think also about like maybe these edges here are more roundish instead of this hard edge. So we can do that. And I'm going to start by using the quick groups again. And I'm gonna select X and -1. And I'm gonna split these selections. And I will bevel the second input here, so we can bevel them, and then I will polyfill them back. And I'm gonna set this to single polygon. And now we have easily created round edges on these corners, so they're not that sharp anymore. So we can also build in here a switch node to switch between that style. So let's take a look, and this can cause a problem with the surface detailer here, as you would see that. So with style 1, it's also going to look at the edges and how much points it's going to have. So if I wouldn't do the intersection, you can see that each point here will get a sphere, and this is then for all the models. We can do a little workaround here, and we need to enable the stacking feature here too. So I'm going to enable this. So it's going to throw an error, and what we will have to do, this is my first input, and this quick group node is my last input. And as you can see, it's now looking first at this geometry for placing the detail. So it's going to look at these corners on, do I need to place something in this corner? So you can see this more as the actual reference geometry it's going to look at. And then the first input is where the actual manipulation or Boolean would happen. So this should work fine with and without the bevel. So if you want to bevel the panels, that's also nice to have. We can also go back up here and like switch between these panels, like you can see here. So now we have this result, and I'm gonna group this result, and I'm gonna call the group panels. So I know that these are my panels, and I would like to merge my base shape actually. So, and because I referenced my base shape with this null node, I can use, for example, the object merge node, and I can drag and drop my null node in here, and I could use this here in the merge. As you can see here, it's now merged together, and the size, I want to adjust it a bit so my panels stick out. So I'm gonna scale this down, and I'm gonna bevel the result. Next thing that I also want to do is maybe add a little bit more detail on the panel. In the Sci-Fi panel generator tutorial, I made this pre-model, so you can model something similar or model something new, and I can use then this to add some little details on the panels. And I'm gonna make a group node, the quick group one, and I want these details to be on these primitives, and I will be using the poly expand again. And as you can see here, it's not working, and that is because it's a full 3D dimensional mesh, and I only need to have a 2D output. So I'm gonna split it, and I'm gonna again lower this value. So basically what I'm doing here is I'm gonna decide the area that my model can be on. Then I'm going to add a normal and set it to points. So we have normals facing this direction, and I'm gonna scatter points on this geometry. So this might be too much points, of course. Also notice if you want to do the normal node, you can see that the points don't have any direction. If you do the normal nodes, they all have the direction of the primitive. I'm gonna start with 2 points here in the scatter. So right now at this moment we will have some detail here and some detail here. And then again, by using this poly expand, we can then refine the area some detail should be in. So we could, for example, already start copy 2 points, and these points I want to copy my model on, my model is probably too big, and I'm gonna just use a transform here. So this is a better scaling for my model. It could also maybe be interesting to have a small group of these details. So I'm gonna lower this to 3, and I'm gonna use a split node. And in this split, I'm just gonna simply say 0.0. On 0.0, I'm gonna copy a grid, and I'm gonna use a 2x2 and scale this down. Then I can simply copy 2 points, the grid on the point, and I have to change the orientation. So now it's the correct orientation, only it's facing the other side. So I'm gonna simply reverse this result, and to make sure we have correct normals, I'm gonna add the normal node here. So right now we have the correct normals, and instead of using this line here, I'm gonna merge these results. So I have seen that my grid is not really nice in scale. So I'm gonna just tweak the scaling here, and this can be a better scale, or we can make it something that looks like this. So we have some few details going on. So you could build a bit more advanced system if you would like to, but this can also work fine. And then we can just scatter this around, and then we have some of these details laying around, and I can merge this here, and now we have this. Next, what I will be doing is I want to have here a model on the side for my door. So I'm gonna again start with the box. I'm gonna make it a bit smaller, and I'm gonna give it the same height and reference this here as well. And then I'm gonna tweak it a little bit. Something like this should be fine. Then I want to boolean some shapes out of this to make it interesting. And I'm just gonna copy one of the shapes here, so I don't have to set this up. And in the boolean, I will be subtracting. So we have something that looks like this. Then I want to do another quick group selections, and again the x-axis, and I want to baffle this, and we can use this selection here to make this bevel. So we only have this bevel on this specific primitive. Then again, I want to apply the Sci-Fi surface detail, and I'm gonna start by copying these results. So I'm gonna select this group and details, and here I might not use the stack one. So we have again the group that is selecting this face on the x-axis. Then first pass is getting some of these points in the corners, and then is the detail on the edges. And I can change this if I would like to. So then I have this result, and here I also want to add some details. And for the details here, what I will be doing is I want a simple box and apply a bevel on them, and I'm just gonna select the edges, so these ones, and I will be duplicating them. Let's say I would like to have 3 versions, and let's see where they are positioned, and I would like to have them here, and we could do it, for example, manually. We don't always have to build this fancy systems like this. And then I can merge this result, so I have some details going on here, and we can still move this where we want to. We can already see here, like, if there is a situation where the procedural model is being placed here, it's not that nicely. So I'm already gonna take care of this in this stage right now, and I'm gonna ask the bounds of this model, and I will be increasing the lower padding here of the Z size. So what we can do, for example, is we can start Boolean. That's one option to go. So I could use this as my shape to subtract from. But then here is then the problem that we can have these weird half shapes or thin shapes. So it's not really nice to have. Another option is then if I assemble this part and click create pack geometry, and what basically will happen now is that each piece is now represented by a point, as you could see here. If you can also go to the spreadsheet, and we have 3 points. So for each piece we have a point. Then we can use a group node and you can connect it here, and we can set it to points. I'm gonna give it the proper name. I'm gonna just call it to delete. So every point in this group is going to be deleted, and I will be using the bounding region function. And here I'm gonna set it to bounding object, and this is using the second input. And we can already see here that it's selecting the last piece here. So if I would move this up or down, you can see everything is now selected. So we can blast this piece away by using the blast node and filling in the to delete, and we can see it's deleted now. So let's move this back up, and you can already see it working here. And also we enabled packed geometry here, which means it's now packed. That's why it's a point only. And we have to unpack this geometry pack again. And now we can see everything is back to the geometry that we know. And then I can merge this in here. So if you would play around with values, we can see that everything is adjusting to our system. Then these two I will be merging. So I have like my first look at my door. And then what I will be doing here is I want everything on the other side as well. And I'm going to use the symmetry. So this is in the game dev tools. As you can see here, it's now being placed on the bottom, but we can use this handle to place it on this side as well. Then also here I'm going to create an attribute, and I will be calling this the index ID. So I later know which part is which if I make multiple models. And I'm going to store this in the primitive, and this can also be an integer. Then next I'm going to make a frame for my door. So now I want to quickly see my door, and I'm going to mirror this result. And I actually see that I have made a mistake here. This part that I just created should be on the other side. So I'm just going to go back up here and place my box here. Tweak some of these settings. So we have the result here now. So you could see that it was easy to tweak this even if I made a small mistake. And now if I go back to the mirror and mirror this result, I have a first look at my door. So next thing is I want to build a frame for the door. So I'm going to start out with the box, and I will be creating first a top piece here for the frame. And I'm going to scale this down. And I actually know that the width that I choose was 0.5. Beginning of the video, my box of this door was 0.5. Then I've also added this side piece, which extended this size of the door. So I can actually go back up here, and if I would right click, copy parameter and paste it in here. So we have now referenced this value 0.5 multiply by 2 because we need to have the full door, and then I'm gonna add another value, so I know it's big enough, and I'm gonna start with 0.7. So I have some place also here on the sides to also build the frame here. Then I'm just gonna scale the box a bit, and I will start booleaning out this shape. And again here I'm going to use a box with a baffle on them, and I'm gonna set this divisions to 1 and put it something like here. and see the result. And I want to subtract this, and now I can tweak this a bit better. Something like this. And I'm going to repeat this and merge this. So I'm going to just scale the box, and you can, for example, create interesting shapes. Like you can easily copy paste this and Boolean based on what you would like to have. So it could look something like this, for example. Doesn't necessarily have to be the same. And then I also want to baffle the edges. And first of all, I'm going to lower the amount. So now everything is beveled. And I'm going to use the ignore flatten edges. And this is then basically on the angle between edges. You could see here. This is sort of like more the results that I was looking for. Then I would like to have the surface details also here. And again, I'm just gonna copy paste it from what we did earlier. So don't always have to set this up. And let's see how this looks out of the box. And it already looks decent. It looks nice. Then I want to all these details on the other side as well. So using the symmetry one, and you can then have details on the other side as well. I'm also getting like a very thin shape here, and I'm gonna simply transform my shape and move it forward. So you can see that it's now being a bit more thicker in shape. What I would like to do here is then position it better. So I'm gonna use a transform. And I know the height of my door was this 1.25. Would now view my door, and if I do the axis align, you can see it's now perfectly here on top. So it's probably gonna do a minus 0.2 or something. So also here again, I can go to my original box. Maybe I can give it color to make it as clear. And I can here then copy the value, copy parameter, and go back to where I'm currently working, and then paste this value as reference, and then I will do the minus 0.1. So now the values are linked to each other. So if I would change the door now, you can see that everything is updating except for this model because I forgot to link it. So I'm just going to do the same here then, and copy parameter and then paste a reference. So if I would now move up or down, everything is going to scale along nicely with the door. And I can also test the width of the door. So I can see that my top piece is working, but again, this piece isn't working again. So I'm going to copy this 0.5 value, so copy parameter, and I want this piece to move automatically, and I just will put a transform here, and I'm gonna in here in the transform, I probably have to first do the axis align so it's perfectly in the center, and then I'm gonna in here add values, so paste the reference. And we can see it's now automatically here. And you can also add or subtract some low values to position it a bit better. But now, if I go back here, it should scale along nicely, as you could see here. So later on, I don't have to clean it up and link everything together. So then I want to create the side bars here to support this structure. And for the side one, I will be using similar system I have here. And I'm going to start out with a box again. And what I first like to have is the height. So I'm going to go back again to this node, copy the parameters, go back to where I'm working, and then paste this value. So paste relative reference, So I have the correct size, and then of course I want to channel reference here and divide it by 2. And now it's perfectly the size of the door, and the height at least. And then just scale this to a proper size. And now I'm going to start Boolean shapes out of it. So because I'm going to use this very similar way, I'm going to copy one of these shapes here and Boolean, and then we can start building here as well what we would like to have. And maybe I have a shape that is going this way, something like this maybe. And I would also like to have an opening for my door to open. So I know my door is perfectly in the middle of this grid. And to be sure I have enough space, I'm gonna quickly view my door and see if it has enough space. So this part might be too flat, so I'm gonna move this up, maybe make this a bit bigger. Then again, I want to bevel it to have some nice bevel edges. And I'm gonna put divisions to 1 and use the ignore flatten edges. So only have this beveling on these sides. And I still don't like the way how small this is, so I might move this up and lower the bevel like this. And again, we're gonna detail this model and we're gonna use the SciFi surface detail, copy this system, and we can look what the result is and we can use this. And then I would like to position the model better, so I can use the transform, and then we can reference the correct value to move it up here. So we can go back to our node, the base, and copy parameter and put this as a reference. And we might have to add a small value, so I'm going to start with 0.1. So you can see it's placed here now. So if you want to move it a little bit more, like this, that should be fine. And then I want to symmetry again, so we have both sides, same detail and model. Then these models I want to also add the index attributes, so we can know later on which part is which. So I will be copying this attribute we made here and copy it here. So this is then number 2 and this is then number 3. And we can merge then everything together, as you can see here. Of course it didn't mirror this part, so if you would like to have a quick view of the door, this is how it would currently look. Quickly go here and see if my sort of like the first links I made are working correctly, and they are indeed working decently. Then the last thing I would like to have on my door is maybe there is some lock system here. So I'm gonna start out with a tube, change the axis to x-axis and end caps. I'm gonna increase the poly count and scale this piece where I would like to have it. So let's say I would like to have it here. Then I would like to bevel this piece. And again, we're gonna use the ignore flatten edges and lower the amount of beveling. So based on the angle, we can now lower our poly count easily, as you could see here. Then I'm gonna add some detail in here, and I will be using quick groups. And in this quick groups, I want the x-axis, so I have this here, and then I'm gonna extrude that face, that primitive. So I'm gonna use the selection group. I want to have an inset like this and enable the groups, and I'm just gonna add a 1 so I know which one is which. Then doing the extrude again, but I will be using my group I just made, which is the edge front one. And instead of having this inset again, I'm going to go inward. And I don't need this group, but I would like to have the edge group, which is the green one here. I would like to have the green one as a group. And this is then the front group. So the green one is the front and the back one is the red one. Then I'm going to use a bevel. And we can actually bevel on this group I just made. So we have the seams. So you can see here we bevel the seams. And I'm going to use the shape on profile. And I'm going to increase the poly count a little bit more. And I'm going to play around with the shape. And as you could see, we can easily create something that looks like this by just manipulating shape and adding more divisions. Then I'm going to Boolean some shapes in here and use the subtract again. And in here I'm going to use the torus and a box. I'm going to first start with the torus and I'm going to use it to create like a ring in the center. So like this, but I'm going to lower the poly count. So something like this. And then for the box, let's merge them together first. And then for the box, I would like to have it somewhere here, for example. And in Game Engine, I can add a glowing effect here. And then further, I want to use the symmetry. Do it like this. And I might move it a bit forward like this. And I'm going to merge it here. And I see that it moved more forward, so it sticks out more. And also here I need to assign that attribute. And this one is part 4. And this is then the base of the procedural door. And in the next video, we're going to create a digital asset or HDA. So we can use this in Game Engine